Hello and welcome to Toolbox Talks. My name is Matt Jones and you are joining us today for a very special episode. I'm speaking with a gentleman who is by far and large somebody that is globally considered an expert in what they do. Dan Holohan from heatinghelp.com is an expert in the heating realm, and he is actually the author of 18 industry-specific books. He came referred to by Al Levi, who you may be familiar with from previous podcasts. Al's joined us on the show a number of times, and Dan and him have worked very closely over the years, along with Alan Raw, who you may also recall. This is an amazing podcast, actually, because although I did have a framework of what I wanted to follow, we pretty much just turned it into a conversation, and I didn't ask a large number of the questions that I would normally. However, you're going to find this is pretty interesting because Dan's really specialized in traditional heating methods and educating people about, how to repair, operate, and basically run these, I wouldn't say ancient, but, heating systems that exist in cities like New York where he lives. And it's kind of a dying art, these sort of things don't get taught so much these days. So, people really need to go looking for information about how they can repair and upkeep these old systems. And that's basically, Dan's built an entire business and, a full-fledged life around it pretty much. He is the heating expert. So you're going to love this podcast. I was blown away. It's probably one of my favorites, to be honest. So I hope you enjoy it. And if you do enjoy it, please leave us some comments in the show notes or head across to iTunes, Stitcher or SoundCloud where you can leave us a review. Okay, well, that's all from me. Enjoy.
Giving tradies and contractors around the globe the tools to run a modern business. You're listening to Toolbox Talks from the Site Shed. Now here's your host, Matt Jones.
Hello and welcome back to Toolbox Talks. And today we have a very special guest all the way from New York in the USA, Mr. Dan Holohan from heatinghelp.com. And Dan, if you may remember, was referred to the show via Al Levi, or was it Ellen? I can't remember. I think it was Dan. I think it was Al, wasn't it, Dan?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was back in, that would have been back in probably episode, or maybe in the 50s or 40s, somewhere along there. But Dan, thanks very much for joining us on the show today. I know I know you're a busy man.
Yeah, I'm a retired guy. It's a pleasure to talk to you guys. You're my reason to get up today.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you nonetheless. I mean, obviously, you came very highly referred to by both Al and Ellen, and they were both huge hits on the show. And I know you're a very accomplished author in the space of heating and steam. And I know you've run I suppose for the audience, I just like to get a little bit more of an understanding of what you come from and your background, and maybe we can shed a bit of light on, I suppose, your influence that you've had with both Al and Ellen over the years, and in the space of writing and the stuff that you guys create. So thank you very much for joining us. Much appreciated.
Oh, it's good to be here. Thank you.
So I suppose primarily, I know you're not a tradesman yourself. However, you certainly have had a lot of experience within the heating realm. How did you get started in that whole industry?
Well, my father worked in the plumbing supply house business when he came back from World War II, and he got into that because there was work and plenty of overtime because everything was being built right then in the 50s. And he moved us from Manhattan out onto Long Island, about 30 miles east of Manhattan, and so we could have a house and get out an apartment, my brother and I. And he commuted into the city, which was rough, back and forth in the car and the train. And in 1967, he decided to take a job on Long Island, and he went to work for a manufacturer's representative.
Yep.
So these are, it's quite different from the wholesale business, but it got away from the commuting. And then in 1970, I joined him because I was out of junior college. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And my father says to me, kid, you go into the heating business because it gets cold every winter and it's like money in the bank, and you'll never be out of work. So so far so good.
Yeah.
That was 1970. And I stayed there for 19 years and just kind of fell in love with the history and the contractors, because New York is such a melting pot. You've got so many different types of people there and so many old buildings. I mean, we've got buildings that are running on the heating systems that were installed in the 1880s and that are still up and running.
Wow.
So the challenge I was seeing is we sold a lot of this steam and hot water related equipment, but many of the people that understood how the systems worked were gone. And they became what I called in my writing the dead men. The people that put in, the big pipes and the big boilers and all this stuff that people in the 70s were staring at and trying to figure out what was going on because literally, the old professors that knew all about this stuff were gone. They either died or they retired. So I would ask questions and, people didn't have answers. So, not being a mechanic myself or mechanically inclined in any way, what I do is read. And I started to go to the library and just devour these books that were written in the 19th century about these systems when they were new. And those voices just spoke to me. And the stories there and the history and the English history and American history was just delicious. And, I began to write for the manufacturers rep. I wrote a newsletter that we called The Problem Solver, which we sent out monthly to 5,000 contractors. And in this, I was just relating stories of things we saw in the field and problems we solved. And I would weave in this history of, bringing Dickens' visit to America and talking about the buildings and the steam heat and people hanging themselves in the pipes and in the prisons. And, it captured I guess the romantic side of the contractor, such as it was. But, I always wanted to be a writer from when I was a kid. I just didn't have anything to write about.
Yeah.
And, after 19 years, my wife and I were married in 72. And we managed to have 4 daughters in 3 years. And the last time around, we had twins, so we kind of cheated a little bit. But I'm looking at these girls who were growing like corn and realizing that in the year 2000, all 4 of them would be in college at the same time. And, I was an old school dad that wanted to pay for that. So I went to my old boss and I said, is there a way for me to buy into this business at some point? Because I've got this big burden coming up. And he says, no, this family, you'd never be able to buy into it. And I said, well, I don't see how I could afford to do what I have to do working for you. And he looks at me and he says, hey, I don't either. So I said, well, what would you do if you were me? And he says, well, I would definitely quit. But nothing's going to happen to you unless you're willing to take a chance. And that was probably the best advice I've ever been given in my life.
Wow.
So I said, okay, I'm gonna leave. And I said, how much notice do you want? And he says, can you give me like 6 months? So I did.
Yeah.
And left, and we had very little money saved. We had like $5,000 that we managed to put away because the 4 girls and everything, paying for a mortgage. And I set out to write a book that I called The Lost Art of Steam Heating, that was my first book, and I was going to self-publish it. And it took me 3 years to put that book together. And again, it was filled with, a lot of mechanical history. And I write like I speak. So I'm telling stories for the whole thing. And it's written so you don't have to be an engineer to understand it. And homeowners buy it and they get it, and contractors buy it and they get it. But it got to a point where I had to come up with a lot of money to publish this thing. And at the same time I finished the book, my van broke down. So I had to replace the van, and I had no money at that point. So I was sitting with Al Levi, and one day we're having a cup of coffee, and he says, when is this book going to be published? Do we have to wait till you're dead? Publish it posthumously? So I explained the situation that I had to buy this van. So he says, well, how much do you need? So I said, well, the printer wants $17,500 to print the first run. So Al reaches in his pocket, and he takes out a personal check, and he writes me a check for $17,500, and he slides it across the table, and he says to me, pay me back whenever you can.
Wow.
And doesn't ask for a paper, doesn't ask for collateral, doesn't ask for anything. He just gives me this money. So the book comes out, and much to my astonishment, we sold those 5,000 copies in the first 6 months, and had to print it again. I think it's gone through like 26 or 27 printings at this point, but I was able to pay Al back within 6 months, and we sold that book in every state of America, including Hawaii. And then I find out that there's actually steam heat in Hawaii. And then at one point we got an order from NASA. The people that put the men on the moon. And, my wife says, well, I guess it ain't rocket science. I said, no, it's harder. So we framed that order, and it was like a 30-page purchase offer for this $30 book. And that was a $1 million book.
Can you give us a quick overview of that book, Al? Dan? Sorry.
Yeah, it just goes into all these old buildings and these old systems and how they did this back in the day, and because there are so many of these buildings that are still there, and particularly in New York and Chicago and Philadelphia and Boston, the oldest cities, we've got these ancient steam systems that are and the buildings are filled with multimillionaires who buy a $40 million apartment, and then the pipes are banging and the radiators are hissing, and they want So they want somebody to do something. And so they go on the internet and they buy my book.
Yep.
And many times they tell the contractor what to do. So it's that type of a situation. But, we made a good business just looking at problems and figuring out how we could help people solve them.
Amazing.
So that led to I had a long career of speaking. I just spoke all over the world on this stuff, and never in Australia, unfortunately. But it was a good long run. And then earlier this spring, our youngest daughter, Erin, just bought the business from Marianne and me, and we shut down the office here in Long Island. She's in Maryland, and she runs it now. So I still write for it, and I still write for the magazines, but I'm on to other things now.
Okay.
So it's been a lot of fun.
That's amazing. I can only imagine the look on your face when you received the purchase order from NASA.
Yeah. It was pretty fun.
That's hilarious.
So also one day I got an order from a plumber who told me he used to be a medical doctor.
Right.
And he got tired of
being broke.
A medical doctor. And he wanted to buy this book, and he got out of medicine because there was just too much of an audience that wasn't thankful, and the insurance premiums that were so high. So he became a plumber.
Yep.
And he dabbled in heating, and he was happy because he said, I can put in a toilet and nobody complains afterwards. It's nice.
Yeah. Wow. Geez, how's that for a testimonial?
Yeah. Good stuff.
So that book, is it still available?
Oh yeah. That book is. In fact, I'm working on a rewrite of it now. After all these years, I wanted to write the Law Starters Team Meeting Revisited and just kind of put in the stuff that I've learned over the past 25 almost years since it first came out, and so we'll have that probably out by the fall.
Yeah, amazing.
But I wrote 17 other books then after that, and then on steam and hot water heat, and self-published them all, and we were just working with a printer, and we had a physical place, but now everything is handled by Amazon.
Yeah, okay.
So they do the printing, they do the worldwide distribution, and Kindle books and print books.
So is that your advice to anyone that's looking to write a book? Just get Amazon to handle it?
Anybody that's got trade experience and stories to tell, you could become your own author right now. All you have to do is write it and put it into a PDF format, and just go to Amazon CreateSpace. That's their program.
Yeah. And
all the software is there. It's free.
Wow.
And you just upload your book, and it becomes available all over the world, and they just put money in your bank account every month.
Crazy. And tell me, how do you go about promoting all of your books you've written? Was it 18, did you say? 18 books?
Yes.
And are all those books, are they all written on steam or the steam-related topic?
Well, the steam, hot water heat. I wrote some books about marketing. I wrote some books about teaching technicians without putting them to sleep. Some of them were more popular than others, and but when you're writing a book, you think every book is going to be a huge bestseller, and it's like children. Like, which one do you like the best? But some of them fell flat. Some of them were incredibly successful, and I didn't think they would be that successful. But you never know till it's out there. And it depends on what the need is at the time. But I was also writing about systems that were not new. So I always focused on the older stuff, because if you're going to write a book and you want it to have a long life, don't write about modern hot water heating or modern plumbing, because that's, by the time your book is out, the trade, everything's changed.
Right.
It's no longer modern. So I chose to write about systems that were in buildings that were iconic, and these systems were going to be there for a long time. Yeah,
okay. Yeah, it's funny. In Australia, we don't, which may not surprise you, the heating systems are obviously quite different to the heating systems you have in the US. And of course, we're considerably younger as a country, so we don't really, I imagine there's a lot of stuff that's coming out now. Like, I've got a client who specializes in hydronic heating for the area he lives in. And I'm actually a plumber myself, and I'd never heard of hydronic heating until I built his website and started reading up on it, and I was amazed. But of course, hydronic heating is probably one of the oldest forms of of heating, right?
Yeah, and it's pretty much the way they do it in Europe. Everywhere in Europe, it's hot water heat, and in America, it's concentrated in the older cities and in the Northeast, and the rest of America heats with furnaces with hot air.
Right.
But hydronics is, I was mentioning earlier about the older buildings. In New York City, there's the Dakota apartment house, which is famous because it's the place where John Lennon was murdered.
Okay.
And that building was built in 1884. And, I've been in there to look at the heating system, and they're running on the original heating system from 1884.
Wow.
And this is a building filled with famous people that are crazy rich, and they're dealing with a heating system that's that old, and they actually have people that work there who are right in the basement for the tenant to call down and say, it's a little hot up here. Can you help? And the guy will ride the elevator up and come up and close the valves on the radiators and then go back downstairs and wait till they call back down and say, now it's a little chilly. And they'll go up and open the valves. So these are like two-legged thermostats that ride the elevator all day. And, but there's, there's famous people there.
And so
that's what we deal with.
Yeah. I mean, that's one thing I did want to ask you, I suppose, in the space of technology that's coming out and, maybe modern heating solutions. I mean, I know in Australia, it's by no means where it needs to be, but it's certainly getting there. We have there's a big awareness around solar related products.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose I'd like to hear from somebody that has, a lot of experience with traditional heating methods, where you see the future of heating going in the space of renewable energy and I suppose, solar, environmentally friendly products, that kind of stuff.
Well, there's a lot that's happened here in the past couple of years in terms of the price of natural gas, because we started this thing called fracking.
Oh God!
Where they go and they inject chemicals and turns out that America's got a lot of gas, so the price of gas just plummeted, and we're now exporters of this stuff. And beyond that, we became exporters of wood chips to Europe because we've got a lot of forests here. So the emphasis kind of went off solar thermal, where you're heating water with the panels, and more into photovoltaic solar, because the PV panels got a lot better, a lot cheaper, and it coincided at the same time with the price of gas going down. So it's cheaper to heat water with electrical solar panels than it is to do it with liquid-based solar thermal panels. So there's that, and when we talk about this thing called hydronics, it doesn't necessarily have to involve boilers, and more it's moving away from boilers, and it's moving. We're relying on pumps and pipes and valves and smart controls because they're drawing heat from the sea. Where they're using heat pump technology from abandoned coal mines that are filled with water. There are places, not necessarily here, but in Europe, where they're heating, like in Stockholm and the Paris metro system, where they're collecting the body heat of the people moving through the stations, and they're using air to water heat exchangers to heat apartment buildings and social housing that happens to be near the train station. And this is just the body heat from people moving through.
Whoa! Hang on a second. What?
It's like the Stockholm train station in Sweden. It's got like 250,000 people that are just moving through there, and everybody's giving off BTUs. So they take that, what would normally be exhaust air, and they run it through a heat exchanger to transfer the BTUs that are coming off the people into water, and then they move the water into radiators or radiant heat under the floor in people's apartment buildings.
That is unbelievable.
And in the Paris metro, it's not just the people standing on the platforms whose bodies heat they're collecting, but also the heat from the trains moving through. So there's a lot of this creative stuff going on. There's also a lot of using solar thermal to capture the heat of the sun during the summer and putting it into boreholes under the ground, deep into boreholes, like hundreds and hundreds of feet down. And then they draw that heat out in the winter.
Huh.
So the Earth is this great heat sink, you're able to like stick it on the ground and pull it back up. So they're building housing divisions and subdivisions and industrial parks that are running off this. So it's really interesting to watch hydronics leap into this area where we don't need boilers to fire fossil fuels, where it's coming off of solar, or it's coming out of the ground.
Yeah, I mean, we have in Australia, we also have a huge issue currently going on with fossil fuel extraction in the form of fracking.
Yeah.
And it's slowly destroying our country. However, the government seems to be so far behind in the space of, innovative technologies. And when you mention countries like Sweden, and I spent a lot of time in Sweden myself, and they are so far ahead, and their vision, for sustainability and environmental products in that whole, Scandinavian, actually in Europe in general, even in countries like Germany, like they just seem so far ahead with foresight and what they can actually, the stuff they create and deliver. And I'm always amazed, I'm pretty passionate about, there's a technology which it's not really technology, but have you heard of rooftop gardening?
Mm-hmm. Yep. We have that.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So, we live in Australia. Typically speaking, the majority of Australia is a pretty mild climate all year round. However, there's not really any emphasis on you'd think in a climate like that, there'd be a push towards something along those lines. However, you go to countries like Sweden where, they're snowed in for 5 months of the year in Stockholm. And, in order to get a development application for a new property or a building you want to create, you've got to have a rooftop garden plan. And the same in Vancouver, actually. It was amazing. And I feel like we're so far behind in Australia, yet we have the perfect climate to accommodate that sort of a push,
Yeah. I'm thinking too of Denmark. I've been over there a few times, and gosh, they're burning garbage, and they're importing garbage from other countries. And I think by 2020 they're going to be completely off fossil fuels. That's the goal.
Wow.
And it's amazing to see everybody's on a bicycle. I was over there in a restaurant with some friends, and we were there for several days, and something was nagging at me. I couldn't quite figure it out. And we were sitting in this restaurant. It dawned on me that there are no fat people in that country.
Yeah. So
I asked the waitress, where are all the fat people? And she says, they're in America. When you charge 200% for a car, sales tax, and $12 a gallon for gasoline, and people just ride bicycles instead because it's cheaper. And then I know in Copenhagen they got rid of the cars by getting rid of the parking spaces, so you could drive in there, but there's no place to park.
Right.
Yeah, and they're building now this incredible district heating plant that's serving pretty much, I think, 98% of the buildings in Copenhagen. And it's so whimsical because they made it so that it's a ski slope. I mean, you can ski down this building. It's on artificial snow, and you take an elevator to the top, and you just kind of wind your way around the building. And it also blows these smoke rings. It's not smoke; it's steam that comes out. Every time they save so many tons of carbon, they blow another ring into the sky. So, they're just delightfully whimsical about all this stuff, and people get behind it, and it's great to see.
Yeah, it's an amazing city. Would it work in New York, do you think, if they implemented that sort of same cycling mentality? I tend to think it's sort of, it's generational as well. Like they've just always done it. So they grow up knowing they've grown up with it.
Well, New York's got district steam system that's the largest in the world, and that's been there since Thomas Edison's days. In fact, the company is called Consolidated Edison, and that serves like the Empire State Building and Rockefeller Center and these iconic New York City buildings. But most of the city is a mix between fuel oil and gas, less and less fuel oil. In fact, just recently in the past couple of years, they banned what we call number 6 oil, which is oil that's so viscous that it needs to be heated before it would even flow. It's like tar. And those are when you look at drawings or photographs in the 1970s and you see this black smoke spewing out of the chimneys of New York, that was the number 6 oil.
Okay.
So that's gone. And, they're slowly moving, not even slowly anymore. They're moving away from oil and deeply into gas. But they also, there's a lot of talk about geothermal.
Yeah.
New York City's an island.
Yeah. So where does that leave? I mean, what's I suppose not your stance, but I mean, from somebody who's spent a lot of time writing and I suppose helping people that are there to repair and look after traditional heating methods, what's your stance then on this segue into more modern and more sustainable solutions?
I think there's a lot that could be done with the older buildings in terms of upping their efficiency by just tweaking them. It's particularly like in New York where we've got so much steam heat because of the height of the buildings.
Right.
Nowadays if they build a new building, they'll make it a hot water system, but often it's steam heating the hot water.
Okay.
So the building that replaced the World Trade Center runs on steam and hot water. So we've got about every 10 stories an independent mechanical room where there's a steam to water heat exchanger. They're using the city's district steam, and the idea there is if you have a building that's 100 stories tall, the static weight of the water is going to be enormous. And down in the ground level, you've got this huge column of water, and you have very specialized equipment to deal with that. So they break it up every 10 stories or so. You've got completely independent systems. Well, how do you get the energy up to the top? Well, they use steam. Because the steam has literally no weight. It's going up into pipes. It's traveling at 70 or 80 miles an hour, and it's very quick, and it's a great way to move energy. So a lot of it has to do with maintenance and upgrading these systems, and often that's just done with tweaking. You don't have to do a a major rip out and start all over again. There's much that can be done with the current buildings, and we're moving toward that. It's but again too, people don't pay for the heat in these buildings. It's included in the rent, and if you save energy, your rent doesn't necessarily go down. It probably won't go down. So the way people have traditionally controlled the heat in cities like New York is to open and close the windows.
Right. Yeah.
We call it the double hung zone valve.
Yeah, amazing. So in these these older buildings within New York, are the pipes that they use to transfer the heat, are they typically, what are they, galvanized steel or cast iron or?
It's what we call black steel pipe.
Black steel. Okay.
And it's big pipe, and it's often welded.
Yep. And insulated, I'm guessing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you ever have problems with, I know we've used black mold steel here, especially for steam. However, is there a corrosive issues, or is there modern technology coming out that will eventually replace that? Plastic?
Oh, there's always corrosion, because all these systems are open to the atmosphere, all these steam systems.
Right.
So there's constant corrosion.
Yeah.
And they treat with chemical and this is like this district steam system I'm talking about. They don't return the water to the boiler. It's all dumped.
Oh.
So the steam arrives at the building at about 200 pounds per square inch, and it has to be reduced, through pressure reducing valve stations. And then it goes up through the radiators and it comes down. They actually have to cool it below, I think, 150 degrees, and then Fahrenheit, and they then just dump that into the sewer.
Right.
So it's a tremendous waste of water, but there's no practical way of getting it back to the boiler, because these buildings are miles away from the boiler.
Yeah. Okay. And so what do they use? What are the boilers? Are the boilers running off gas?
The boilers, now they run off gas. They used to run off coal.
Okay. So I didn't realize.
In fact,
go ahead.
Up until maybe 10 years ago, most of the New York City public school system was running on coal. And not only was it running on coal, but it was running on hand-fired coal. So it was like, when you visit these places, it was like reading Dickens. You go downstairs and there's a fireman down there with a shovel and a rake.
Wow.
And the guy is shoveling coal. And this all had to do with the labor unions and the contracts. They couldn't get rid of these systems because there were people employed to do this work that was done, in 1900.
Amazing.
There was, like 2,000 are still doing the same thing.
Good grief.
All gone now, but that's how long this stuff hangs on.
Yeah, right. So Dan, let's talk a little bit about. I want to talk about the internet, because I know that you were. We had a quick chat early in the piece, and before we started recording, but I found that very interesting. Obviously, you were one of the very early adopters, and I just want to talk a little bit about your journey and your experience with this whole interweb thing. So,
it's been fun. I was, I was a writer, and somebody came to me and said, you should have a website. And I said, what was that? And this was like 1997. And they said, it's this new thing. It's going to be great. And, we'd like to build a website for you. And I said, all right. So they did this, and we opened up a chat room that we called The Wall, which was a term we made up, and Facebook stole it from us, but I should sue them.
Yeah, good luck.
But yeah, I know. So 97, we had this new website, and it just attracted a really big audience because of the bulletin board, and people began to just go on there every day to see what was going on, and that continues to this day. We've got a really big audience on the site called heatinghelp.com, and when we started in 97, we had a fun time because they told us that we could have a links page. And I said, what's a links page? And the guy that was building the site says, well, you link to other websites that are similar and are of interest to you, and they'll link back to you maybe, and that's how you build your audience. So I said, oh, that's great. There's this little company that I'm buying these used books from, because I'm working on a book about steam heat, and I need to get all these books in the 1900s. So he says, well, give me the name and we'll link to it. So I give him the name, and he says to me, this company's never going to make it. I said, why? He says, well, if you wanted to buy used books, you'd have a website called usedbooks.com or books.com. He says, these people, who's going to go to a website called amazon.com and buy books? They're never going to make it. So, in 1997, that made sense. But I think Amazon had like 25 people or so working for them back then. But so they did okay.
That is so funny.
It sticks out in your mind and you remember. But it was lovely because it's, attracted people from all over America and Canada and Europe, and I'd love to see more people from Australia on there because you got so many great stories to tell. But we've got guys that come on that are in Tehran and showing us the jobs that they do. And how else would we know about these people if not for this? I mean, if you just depend on the newspapers, you're going to hate these people, But we got guys that are just like us that are facing the same problems. Customers won't pay them. They're doing good work, and they show what they do. We all learn from each other. So it's a vibrant community, and it we've made a living off this because it attracts a lot of advertisers, and we sell a lot of books on it. And that's the business that my daughter Erin just bought from us last month. Yeah,
fantastic.
So she'll carry it on. She's the next generation.
I'm looking. I signed up to the heatinghelp.com website, to the newsletter a little while ago. And I want to encourage all the listeners out there to go and do the same. It's fantastic. They send out, is it weekly or is it bi-weekly? I can't remember
every Thursday.
Every Thursday, yeah.
It goes out every Thursday, yeah.
Yeah, there's this great email with all these really cool industry-specific topics. A lot of it's heating related, right? But it's not.
That's what Aaron and I do. Some it has it's got a lot to do with energy and just things that are going on in the world that are interesting and
it's not all about heating though. I've read some pretty cool things that weren't specifically related. Like a lot of the stuff I read was related to. I read an article which was I think it was related to. Don't quote me on this, but it was something to do with beer. The beer packaging, that they were recycled beer packaging or something. Like it had a sustainable spin on it.
Yeah. And it's just stuff that we glean off the internet, Aaron and I, as we go through this stuff every day. And on Thursday, it's typically seven stories with just, a brief paragraph about what we think of it and a link to the article. And it's free. So, if you don't like it, you just click a button and we never hear from us again. But, but there's nothing sales pitchy about it. It's just, we're not selling anything to you. It's just a way of reaching out and making connections. Because that's the source of the stories. And many of these stories come to us from the subscribers who just say, here's a great one here. And we always mention people's names and tell a little bit about them. And so love to hear from Australians.
Yeah, no, cool. Well, definitely.
And New Zealanders.
Yeah, and the Kiwis. We love the Kiwis.
Yeah, the Kiwis need a lot of help with their heating, I think, from what I read.
More than likely. Actually, I'm taking a group of contractors over to New Zealand in August. We're going skiing over there. So with the site shed, it's the first one we've done. We're calling it it's called Learn and Ski. We're taking a bunch of contractors over there. We're skiing in the morning, and then we're running a business workshop in the afternoon. So it's a bit of a tax deduction.
Very nice, very nice. Yeah. Well, I forgot to mention that my daughter Erin did a semester at Monash University there in Melbourne.
Oh, right on. Okay.
Yeah, she was over there for half a year, and when she left, I said, I need you to make me two promises. And she said, what, Daddy? I said, don't get your tongue pierced.
Don't get married.
And don't jump out of an airplane.
Oh, okay.
So she, she's there for a few months, and she sends me a picture of her strapped to the sky in midair, and she says, and the caption was, I did not get my tongue pierced. Yeah. She has good memories of Australia.
Yeah, that's hilarious. I think the advice, I wouldn't say the advice, but the instructions that my mother gave me when I went traveling was don't fall in love and don't get a tattoo.
How'd that work out?
We'll leave that one.
Okay.
But I'll definitely post some notes anyway to heatinghelp.com in the show notes. Sorry, some links to it so people can get back there. And I thoroughly encourage people to check that out because it's a really, really cool website. There's some really good content come out there. So let's talk a little bit now about, I suppose, the writing aspect. Like you said to me that you've always considered yourself a writer. Mm-hmm. How did that come into fruition? Was it from the point where you launched the lost art of heating, steam heating?
It's just something I've always been able to do, even as a kid, and just always wanted to do to make a living at this. But when I was younger in my 20s, I didn't know how to make a living as a writer, and I had to get a real job. So, but the industry that we're in is so rich with people stories, and especially in New York. I mean, we've got such a mix of people, and so many of them are just crazy. Yeah. So, the things that these people do and the stories that they've told me are absolutely hilarious. I sat with a contractor one day, and he says to me, I was downstairs in this woman's house, and I'm working on the burner. This is an oil burner guy. He says, and I'm sitting on a bucket, and I've got my box wrench in my hand, and he says, she's got this little chihuahua. And the dog's doing what chihuahuas do. They got that little cookie thing they do with their feet and snarling at me. And the woman says, don't bother the dog. He's got the run of the house. He can do what he wants. He's not going to hurt you. Just leave him alone. The guy says, I'm sitting down there, and his dog's snarling at me. And all of a sudden, he jumps in, and he bites my hand. So I said, get out of here, and he backs up. But this dog's got chops. He looks at me like he's going to come and do it again. So I look at him, and the dog lunges in again, and he says, and just reflexively, I snapped the wrench at him. He says, I hit him right between the eyes, and he went down. So I said, was he hurt? He says, dead. He was dead. Oh. So I said, you can't make this stuff up. So I said to the guy, well, what did you do? He says, well, he wouldn't fit in my toolbox. He says, because it was filled with tools. He says, so I used the toolbox to kind of flatten them out. He says, and then I put him under my arm inside my coat, and I zipped up and I left. And, on the way out, I said to the lady, okay, job's all done. He says, I know you said let the dog out to run the place. He says, I went out to the truck before and he ran out. I hope you find him.
Wow.
He says, I got in the truck and I drove away. I said, well, what'd you do with the body? He says, I drove about 3 blocks, rolled down the window and threw him out like a Frisbee.
Oh, Jesus.
Right about it.
Oh, good grief. And I'm sure there's a lot of listeners out there on the other end of this listening with their earbuds right now on their way to work, just probably freaking. Oh, it's insane. So they're the type of things you write about on the website?
Big part of the website.
Oh, sorry, I'm losing you there a bit, Dan.
Contractor stories.
Yeah, okay. So Dan, tell me, I know Al mentioned that you helped him a lot with his business in the space of, when he was ready to build systems and processes around what he did. He said that you played a significant part in that. Can you tell us a little bit about us?
Well, he and I have helped each other so much. I mean, Al was instrumental in the starting of our business, and I always listen to his advice, and I every now and then get a word in edgewise with him too, which is always nice.
Amazing.
Al's a real New Yorker. But when he wanted to go out and and start this program that he's doing now with these power programs, they needed to sit everybody in the office down at different meetings and talk about procedures and how they did things. So they hired me to be the facilitator for that, and I worked with them, I guess, over about 6 weeks during the summer, and we'd meet every few days and sit with different groups of people, and I would tape record everything that was said. So I would ask probing questions of how do you do this, how do you do that, and what we found out was everybody had different ways of doing things, and some of them were scary ways.
Yeah.
Some of them were things that could have caused big problems for the company. And it was a way of dredging all this stuff up. And then, once we went through that process, and I'd sit there and watch these guys fight with each other, and I'd mediate, and they would all agree this is the way it should be done. So then Al would write that down, and that would go into the operations manual. And then once everybody agreed that every step of the way, this is how things are going to be done, they gave a copy of that book to each person. They had to read it, sign it. And from there on, things became real easy because, somebody can't come back to you and say, well, I didn't understand that's the way it's supposed to be done, because they just signed a book that had everything that is involved with their job, in this book. And, they signed off on it. So it was successful. And then, Al, I know, as he told you, he'd left several years of worth of notice with his brothers and dad before he left. But when he went out, he was ready to do this for other people. And he's helped so many people.
Yeah.
And you just watch, a lot of these guys are successful, but they're successful, busy successful, but they're not making money. And Al shows them how to make money.
Yeah. And so how did you learn, I suppose, what you were able to implement or help Al implement?
I think I'm just a really good listener, and I'm a third party. So, I was safe for them. They could tell me things.
Mm.
We have a lot of, it was an oil company, so the oil gets delivered by trucks. So, and I'm one of their customers. So we were talking about, I've got the drivers in there, and I said, okay, what do you do with the truck when you have to go to the bathroom? Good question, right? I mean, the company probably would not ask that, but here I am, an outsider. I'm just thinking, okay, truck driver's got to go to the bathroom. He's got an oil truck filled with oil. Where do you go? What do you do? So I asked the question, and the guy that delivers our oil is in the room. So he says, where do I go? He says, He says, you know that bush in front of your house? That's where I go. He says, you ever notice that it's not doing too well lately? So the guy was serious. He's peeing in my bush.
Right.
Yeah, he says, well, I'm delivering the oil. It's then the the tank is right there by the bush, so I just pee in the bush. So that answered that question, but nobody had asked that question before. So then we had to have a discussion whether that's a good way to do things, when you're an oil truck driver.
Yeah.
So it got very, very funny.
So had you implemented similar processes into your business?
No, because my business is pretty much me sitting in a room,
right,
dreaming up stories and writing, and then we've got when we had the physical building, we had an office in a building that wasn't here. I worked from home. My wife ran that, and she had ladies that worked for us, and they wanted nothing to do with me, and I wasn't even allowed to go there.
Yeah,
which was nice.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Amazing. Well, look, I'm conscious of the time you're spending with us, so I'll get to wrapping this up. If you don't mind, I'll just might get to a few more questions.
Sure.
So, what does the future hold for you?
For me?
Yeah.
Oh, I want to write novels.
Okay.
Yeah. That's
wow.
I'll continue to write for the trade magazines that I've been writing for since the 1980s, but and I'll continue to write for Heating Help. But I'm on to being a novelist.
Wow. Okay. And what sort of novels?
I just finished one that's about it's called Fixing Charlie Malloy. It's about a 50-something guy who kind of gets pushed out of his job. He's a sales guy, and he can't keep up with the way the world is going in terms of the internet and Facebook. And he's an old school guy who sends personal notes, and he can't deal with when he's talking to somebody they start texting.
Right.
So he gets pushed out of his job, and he's broken. And the story is about him and his wife, and they wind up in Florida, and there's a lot of afternoon drinking in the bars, a lot of funny stuff, just meeting people and kind of slowing down and just trying to get a handle on life and the way he thinks it should be lived.
Cool.
So it's part tragic, part funny, and I finished it. Now I need a publisher. I'm not going to self-publish this one.
Oh, you're not? Why not?
No. I want to see if I can go mainstream with this and just get an agent, get a publisher, and see where it takes me. It's a good book.
Okay. Interesting. And so what spurred on that decision? I mean, how is it different to, your other books? Why have you decided to? It's got absolutely nothing to do with heating. Right.
So after all these years of writing about heating, I said, I just want to tell a people story and just kind of imagine. And it's to sit down and write something of that length is joyous because the characters kind of take over the story and tell it. The novelist has to know the beginning and the end, and everything that happens in the middle kind of happens on its own. It's the craziest thing in the world. They sit in the room with you and tell their story, and you just type it.
When you're writing a book, have you developed a habit or like a system or a process or a time frame? Like how does your typical workday look?
That one I wrote. I started in February. I finished in May, and it was. I was at it for like 10 hours a day, every day of the week. It just flowed. And
wow.
Then of course it's going back and editing and rewriting and just kind of writing to the ear, so it sounds like somebody's talking to you. Yeah. I've always written like that. All my writing sounds like I'm talking to you. It sounds like right now.
Do you edit?
So,
do you edit?
Again? Yeah. And Erin also acted as my editor on this book. And, she's got a writing background from college, and she was brutal. She, I'd liked a certain thing, and she would come back and say, "No, this is not in the character of what this is not what this person would do. Rethink it, rewrite it." And she was brutal, but she was right on every step of the way. So she forced me into being better than I actually am, and I loved working with my daughter. It's great, but gosh, she's ridiculously tough. and
you've got 3 others.
Yeah. It's
okay, cool.
I refer to them as my little wives.
Yeah.
One big wife and the 4 little wives, and now I've got granddaughters too and grandsons. So
oh well,
the life is good. So that's what I'll be doing is writing and just enjoying life.
Good on you. And what's if people want to reach out to you, what's the best way to get you?
Dan at heatinghelp.com. HEATINGHELP.com.
No
Love
worries.
to hear from them.
Yeah, cool. I'll post some. I'll certainly post the links in the show notes as well. So to heatinghelp.com and your Twitter's at heatinghelp, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, that's awesome. Well, look, I think we're pretty much there, Dan. The one question I do ask people on the show as the last question is, who would you like to see on the show next? Anyone pop to mind?
I'd love for you to talk to Erin. I think she could give you a woman's perspective. She's 35 years old and just very strong and very smart and really capable. And she's taken this heating up into places that I never dreamed it would go. I mean, she's just got so many good ideas, and she's not technical, in terms of the heating technology, but gosh, she's brilliant at internet and demographics and who's on the site, what they want, where they're going. It's amazing. We had a day last winter when she calls me and says, I need an article fast about whether a PEX pipe will break if it freezes.
Whether
I just went into the PEX plastic.
Oh.
PEX.
Yeah,
She says there's a lot of people right now on the site searching for that, whether this stuff will freeze and break. So she's give me an article fast. So I put something together based on comments that the people that post on the wall bulletin board have made over the years, and came back that this stuff won't break if it freezes, but the fittings might. So we sent that article out as part of the newsletter and linked it back to the website. And that day we had 20,000 people show up on the website.
Wow.
To look at that article. So that's what she does.
Wow. Genius.
Yeah. She just looks at numbers and just comes up with what does it mean and just acts on it really fast. And she gets that kind of an audience together. Okay. And once you put that many people together, anything can happen.
Yeah, right. That's amazing. Oh, well, I can't wait to speak to her. As I mentioned to you before we recorded, love women. When women come onto the show, they seem to get such fantastic response and feedback. So it'd be great to get her on the show. So I'll definitely get you to introduce us via email if you don't mind.
Oh, sure, yeah. She's funnier than I am too, so you'll love her.
Impossible. Chip off the old block, as they say.
Yeah.
All right. Well, look, Dan, that's great. Thank you so much for your time today. That was amazing. I didn't get to anywhere near the questions that I wanted to ask you, but I certainly did ask a lot that I had not planned on asking. So thanks very much for your knowledge there. It was amazing.
Oh, thanks, man. Anytime. Love to do it again sometime.
Yeah, for sure. Well, perhaps we'll collaborate in the future. And as I mentioned, we'll definitely post all the links in the show notes so people can find you and they can get back to heatinghelp.com. And other than that, that is a wrap.
Great. Thank you.
So if you haven't already, head across to thesiteshed.com and register for our Toolbox Talks, where you'll be regularly sent great episodes just like this straight to your inbox, so you'll never miss one. If you want to join the community, you can head across to thesiteshed.com/members, where for a small monthly fee, you'll get access to regularly updated training material, as well as access to our forum where you can mingle and collaborate with trade-based business owners just like you from all over the world. If you're enjoying this podcast, please head across to iTunes and leave us a 5-star review. We greatly appreciate it, and it helps us spread the word and reach the masses. Likewise, if you know anyone that might benefit from the content we create, then please go ahead and share this with them.
You've been listening to Toolbox Talks by The Site Shed. For more great content just like this, head across to thesiteshed.com and join the amazing community of savvy trade-based business owners.